to, or if you wanted to, give the screenplay as you were writing it and developing it to your father to get feedback? And David, also, if you have what probably most parents have, is the desire to kind of correct their children's homework and do their school projects for them and try to sort of intervene in the process.
And that takes a certain energy that I don't have. I really have to say, and right off the top, that the guy who was mentoring Brand for Antiviral is his producer, Lee Fishman. You know, I mean, and he's been a wonderful producer and mentor. And that is, so I've had very little involvement. I mean, certainly during the course of writing the screenplay, I would look at a draft or two and make a couple of suggestions, and Brand would maybe ask me about a production designer or an assistant director. How was he to work with? How should I approach him? One or two things like that, very little. And the rest was neat. I mean, really, because that's the day-to-day work. It's a full-time job, you know, it really is. And it was not my job.
And Brendan, for you, in terms of the feedback you got and the feedback you wanted, both from David and also from me? What did you seek out? How much did you want?
He begged me for advice and I wouldn't give him.
I just kept shoving the scripts under the door. It's in my bedroom, but you know, he wouldn't take them and I couldn't get out.
You know, you guys are joking now.
It worked for him as a child and it works now too.
Yeah, it's great. I actually have a tracer on my foot and I'm going to have to go back after this. But yeah, no, it was good. I mean, I did get a bit of feedback from my dad, but I agree. Yves was mentoring me, and we got deep into the specifics of the script and the process, and discussed it. And went over to his house, to his place. He made fantastic vegan food, and just really gave me a lot of feedback. But I mean, with and a lot of creative freedom too. But it was a long discussion that started before filming and continued to the end. So
we've been talking a lot about the influence one way, really, from father to son. But I know with all families it goes both ways. Do you feel like you have influenced your father in any way creatively, whether in terms of your opinions on films or music or literature, anything that you've fed his way?
I have no idea.
We'll talk about that later. Well, actually, but I would think any parent knows that the kids really keep you au courant. I mean, this is certain. When I was a kid, I was very much into pop music, and I knew everything that was going on. I actually worked at Sam the Record Bands. I knew exactly what was the hot new record and so on. I've been out of that for many years, but your kids bring you that stuff. It's a really interesting kind of reversal.
What surprised you that Brandon brought to you and said, Dad, you really have to check this out?
He never says that. We just, Brand, do you know anything that you've ever...
You have to check something out, but I'll tell you after.
Okay. We're kind of, secretive, really. Family secret, that.
Your experience is inevitably different from your father's at the beginning of your career. You are the son of a very well-known director internationally. David, when you started out, you were essentially carving this out for yourselves. How do you think that's affected what happens for you now, Brandon? And I also, David, want to ask you about your very first experience at Cannes, because I think it was very different than Brandon's is this week.
I want to start with that.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I came to Cannes in 1971. I was living in Tourette-de-sur-Loup, which is in the Maritime Alps, it's near Vence, the town of Vence. And I was really just there because a friend of mine, who later became my brother-in-law, but it wasn't at the time, was living there and had discovered this town. And 900 people, medieval little town perched on the side of the mountains and so on. And I was there, I lived there for a year, and I had made two films, underground films, Stereo and Crimes of the Future. And I wasn't sure that I really was interested in a career in film necessarily. I still had thought that I would be a novelist. I aspired to be an obscure novelist. And actually, I still aspire to be an obscure filmmaker, but it's harder to do that. Because if you're really obscure, you can't get your next film financed, so that's a problem. So I thought, well, the Cannes Film Festival is on, it's just, come down to Nice and go over to Cannes. And so I came down, and it was a real shock, because I'd been living in this tiny little town, and I didn't even know how to cross the Croisette, with all the traffic. I was like, I hadn't seen the traffic light for a year. And the Ferraris and the MV Augustas and all that stuff, and the Sean Connery poster that was the height of the entire Carlton Hotel and so on. And I fled, I fled back to my little, Erie, up in the mountains. But then I thought, if I'm going to be a professional filmmaker, I will have to come to terms with things like the Cannes Film Festival. So I came back down with quite a different attitude, and then I had the greatest time. I was a million miles away from the Palais and the official films. But what was great was the film marketplace, which was taking place on the streets. It really was like drug dealers on the corner, except they were like Korean filmmakers selling their films to Finnish distributors and stuff like that. And I got to know a lot of really interesting people, and I understood that there was the tip of the iceberg was maybe the official selection, but the main body of the iceberg underneath the water was thousands of films that you rarely got to see, but were being made and traded all over the world. And it was a real education. It was really fantastic. And Telefilm Canada was then the Canadian Film Development Corporation, and they had offices in the Carlton. And they let me sleep there at night. I had a suite at the Carlton. I slept on the couch.
You were couch surfing.
I had to leave in the morning when everybody came into work. But that was my introduction to Cannes. And of course for Grant it's totally different because he is here officially. There's a structure and so on, and so it's really quite a different introduction to the festival.
And how has it been for you, Brandon, to come with all of that machinery around you when you have a film in official selection?
It's been really exciting, obviously, but also a little nerve-wracking. And again, it's a room full of people.
They're all your friends, man.
Yeah, well, some of them are. So it's been great, obviously, because it's a huge honor to be a part of the festival officially. But I also think that I haven't really, I don't really have a sense of the festival because I've been here working, and it's my first time here, so I haven't had a chance to see films or kind of explore too much.
So this is your first time here, even in all of the years that your father would have come, you didn't, for whatever reason, come to big film events like this?
Yeah, no, I've never. I've been to Nice once, but this is the first time I've even been in the city.
David, was that by choice or by accident? Did you try to keep Brandon away, and your children generally, away from the hubbub that is around the film industry?
Once again, laziness as a parent, faulty parenting, and money. We couldn't afford to bring him. He was very demanding. But truly, whenever I would come here, it was business. It's not a vacation, and of course you could make a case for you should help your kids be educated into what you do and so on. But it just didn't work out that way. Basically, it came, do the work. It's always been, it's wonderful, but it's exhausting. When you have a film here, and so it almost never occurred to me to bring the kids, because it was not that kind of vacation. We went to the Cayman Islands, and then we brought the kids, but that was a real vacation.
This is a rather nice way to come though together.
I think it's fantastic, and in retrospect, I say we were really wise parents. but there was never any attempt to protect the kids from the film business, because I think it's different if you live in LA. It was interesting for me to see my friend Ivan Reitman and see how his son Jason has grown up in LA as a sort of Hollywood guy. Very different kind of thing. I think if you live in Hollywood, you can't get away from it because the business is everywhere. So even if you don't introduce your kids to the business, his friends will, because because their parents are all in the business, you know. So it's quite different in Toronto. I mean, one of the reasons I didn't want to move to LA was exactly that. You know, I wanted to live someplace where movies were not everything. But I wouldn't. So aside from that, I mean, I guess in a sense, there was a moment when I thought I might have to move to LA, and if I had done that, then the kids would have been